There are millions of acres of opportunity out there. They belong to you. Every day, decisions are being made that affect your land, your water, your wildlife. You should know about them. This is your mountain. Welcome, everybody, to the Your Mountain podcast. I'm your host, David Wilms. I'm joined again for the 9th time or the 10th time. I don't even know how many of these we've done.
10.
Mike McGrady correcting me. That's what he's here to do.
That's what I'm here to do. My sole job. All right.
And you're good at it. I give you a lot to correct.
That's right.
And Nephi Cole.
I'm surprised that Mike is still here, but are you really shocked that I am, Dave? That I'm still here?
You rolled in. I didn't know if you were going to make it.
Well, it was tough to make it. My arms are very tired, but...
Yeah. Don't tell bad jokes.
Oh, well, you got to have jokes.
We had some feedback recently that your joke telling could
who?
Use improvement. I don't know, my kids and...
Thank you.
Yeah. So we are at the North American Wildlife Officers... excuse me, I'm going to say that all over again. North American Wildlife Enforcement Officers Association annual banquet. We have a couple of guests with us. I'm going to let them introduce themselves because I don't want to mess up their names on the record. Shawn's been a longtime friend of mine. Shawn, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Shawn Blajszczak. I'm one of the members of the Wyoming Game Warden Association, and we're the ones who took on the task of putting on this event this year. The North American Wildlife Enforcement Officers Association also contributes in putting on, but they ask for, one of the states to help put it on each year. So we offered to do it this year, and we're glad to have it here in Cheyenne.
Yeah, we are here in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and it is, at a pretty great facility, and the place is packed.
Yeah, so we got the whole facility booked out here, and we have 2 or 3 other hotels booked out. There's more than 450 people out here registered, and then there's their families here and everything. Everyone's having a good time. There's lots of different events, so they can go horse riding. They had BNSF did a train ride the other day up to basically Laramie back twice for them.
Now when you say BNSF, you're Burlington Northern Santa Fe. Right?
Yeah, the railroad.
The railroad.
So they brought in some old train cars, really fancy ones, and took everyone out for free. So we've had some cool stuff like that for people to do. Lots of people got to see elk and stuff for the first time that maybe haven't before. So they're all having a good time out here and enjoying the West.
And one of the people that's at...
where are you hiding the elk? where are you having them tied up?
Well, we're having people find them pretty easily at Rocky Mountain National Park.
Oh, that's cheating. That's
like domestic animals.
Yeah, that's cheating.
They're still free range.
And one of the 400 plus people that are in attendance, Liza, why don't...
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Liza-J Bobseine. I'm with the Environmental Conservation Police in New York. So it's pretty awesome to come out here and see what some other game wardens are dealing with and see the beautiful country out here.
Have you been to Wyoming before?
No, this is my first time.
Did you see an elk?
Not yet. Working on that.
Shawn, you didn't get her on the trip?
No, I wasn't in charge of that. There's so many volunteers out here trying to get everything done. There's different stuff for all age classes and everything to do during the day. So
how many volunteers do you have?
Most Wyoming Game Warden Associations all volunteering. It's mainly just internal. For one of the events, for the run we had a 5K run. We did have some external volunteers that I organized, but most of it's, Wyoming Game Warden Association members. So
tell me a little bit about the association. I don't want to put you on the spot.
So the association's just a group of guys. We've been around for quite a while now. The game wardens just decided they needed a place so we could lobby and stuff. Because as game wardens working for the state, you cannot lobby as a state employee, but we could lobby as a game wardens association. So if we see, as just individuals of the association see something that we don't think is quite right going through legislative process, we can step in and voice our opinion just like any public citizen can. And it helps that we have a group of us and we can say this many people back that. And this is why we back that. So that's a really good thing. We also support each other if anything legal goes wrong, anything like that. And then it's just a good time to, everyone likes to get together at these meetings. We have state ones every year too. It's a good time to get together, talk about your war stories, talk about hunting, fishing, just all the camaraderie. Here, everyone can talk to everyone. Everyone always asks everyone about how they hunt, how they fish, what they do for fun. I haven't seen a single person here that won't just talk to you freely, so it's an awesome time. And Wyoming Game Wardens Association, sort of the same thing, just smaller than the national one.
So let's talk about the national one a little bit, since that's what we're here doing, right? And that's what you're all here as part of. What, if you can talk about it, what kind of recent issues have you had to look at as a national organization that you've weighed in on?
The national organization doesn't weigh in as much on things. We mainly watch a lot of things and try to get a lot of outreach out there and sort of correlate the groups and get them lined out with each other. From what I've seen, I haven't seen anything major that the national associations.
I would add that probably a big consideration for all of our agencies right now is hunter safety. It's a big issue in the forefront of everybody's minds, and it's something that we deal with as wildlife law enforcement officers. Yeah,
hunter safety, and then hunter recruitment's the other really big one for everybody, because if we lose hunters, we lose jobs. That's what we all want, is the North American model. Pretty much every state wants it if they don't even have it, some of them, but everyone wants that North American model where everyone can get out hunting and fishing, and all the wildlife is owned by the public. So we know, I know recently I saw a report in Wyoming saying applications were up this year for the third or fourth consecutive year for hunting applications this year. How are things going in New York right now?
We're seeing the biggest growth in hunting license certifications in women and youth, which is fantastic, because that's obviously, especially with the kids, that's the future of hunting. Overall, there's been a bit of a decline, but we are seeing growths in those two really important sectors, so that's fantastic.
No, that's great, and I think we're seeing that more nationally too. So that's great that New York's seeing it. I know Wyoming, we're seeing that as well.
So you're seeing a more diversified hunter portfolio, if you will, even though you may be seeing kind of a dip in some of your numbers. You're getting a wider variety of people out doing it.
Yeah,
definitely. And I think all of our agencies have gotten a lot better at targeting who we're recruiting and getting better recruitment tools. We all work with each other. There's national conferences for that R3 stuff, or retention, recruitment, and reactivation. So people attend those and spread ideas and what's worked, what hasn't. So that way no state has to reinvent the wheel when it comes to that stuff. So
what kind of work are you doing association-wise on recruitment retention?
Association-wise, it's more of just it depends on the Warden Association. I know ours, we do a lot of scholarships. We'll get involved with things like Expo and other trainings. We support guys that do different mentorship programs, like the Paint Rock guys out of Orland area. We'll help out with that financially as a Wardens Association as much as we can. We don't have much for, money, because ours is just based off dues from the wardens, basically, and then sometimes we'll get a commissioner's license that we can sell. That's how we are sort of funded. So,
well, I think so. Shawn and I have known each other for I don't know how long.
Quite a while,
right? And I've constantly been impressed by the work that game wardens do, and so I'm just absolutely thrilled to have this association in Cheyenne, in this community. From what our Visit Cheyenne folks are saying, the economic impact that you are all having by just being here for a week is about $700,000 on our community. And so that's, in and of itself, that's amazing.
I didn't know we were such big spenders,
Well, you must get paid really, really well for what you do.
Either that or that's what they're hoping.
Game wardens, that's where it's at.
That's what I heard. That's what I've heard is, because I originally went to school. I was going to be a game warden.
Instead, he had to be an attorney.
Yeah, well, game wardens make too much money. I wanted to live
sparsely.
Sparsely, yeah. So, what other kinds of activities do you have planned this week?
So we're almost done with the week. Later in the week, we have our banquet tomorrow, and that's pretty much the end of it. The bigger events have already went. We had a 5K race, and we had the Warden Skills game today.
Yeah, so you were telling me about this Warden Skills game. First of all, I want to know what is this skills game?
It's sort of just like a fun day for everybody. They have random skills they do. I don't know what they did this year because I didn't get to make it up. I was busy with the kids, but they'll do stuff like kayaking, running.
Warden Olympics.
Well, so that's kind of what I was getting at. Are there bragging rights here? I mean, Liza, did you participate in the...
I didn't participate in today's games, but I've participated in other ones, and it's usually something kind of ridiculous, like running with hip boots while you set a trap and rescue a baby. And fall down all
What
over
happens?
yourself.
Yeah.
So that
Something
doesn't
that
usually
you-
happen.
Something that you've done pretty frequently, I'm assuming, in the field.
They take elements of what we really do, whether it's archery shooting or paddling a canoe or wherever you're out doing your job, and they try to make it as fun and hilarious to watch as possible.
Yeah, because not everyone can be involved, so you got to make everyone else have fun laughing at the people involved. So that's always the best way to do it.
Well,
I don't know what to say.
I got to say,
If he's normal, I guess that's just what we do in kind of a, on a grander scale.
no, it's not at all what we do on a grander scale.
It sounds like a day at the office with Dave and Mike to me. Just kind of.
Yeah, I don't think I could do running games with hip boots while I'm assuming this is the archery competition. You're wearing your hip waders, you're running through the muck with a bow.
No, setting a trap.
Well, no, you're setting a trap and then you're shooting something with a
Oh.
bow, and then I would assume it's all combined into one massive chaotic event. That's it.
Yeah,
in my
there's
mind,
different stations.
In my
and
mind,
stuff.
that's what I'm saying.
They did it this year up at Kurt Gowdy, so
Okay.
sort of cool. They got to
You
get
did
up
a
in the
lot.
mountains a little bit, and everyone got up there via bus and had a good time. So
No, that's good. That's great. And Shawn, thank you for everything that you've done.
yeah, no problem.
Yeah, everything you've done to get this all set up and to get everybody here. And you can tell, people are out there having a really good time, and we're keeping you from it and Liza from it, and hopefully here in a second some other people from it. But before we do, I want to talk to Liza some about work in New York.
The great state of New York.
Yeah, in New York.
I was just there.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
I was in the Bronx.
There's not a lot of hunting in the Bronx.
You should watch what you say.
Yeah.
One of my
There could
officers
be
actually had a pretty fantastic deer poaching case in Staten Island not too long ago. So not the
That's-
Bronx, but kind of
Really?
close.
I
yeah.
could see that.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
a little bit more sense than the Bronx for
Yeah.
sure. So, are you a New York native?
Yes, I grew up in Western New York, and I've worked in Long Island and New York City, and now I'm back upstate. So
And if you had to choose, are you glad to be back upstate, or do you?
well, I love the work downstate.
Yeah.
Out in Montauk, there's a lot of commercial fisheries, even big game hunting. There's really nice bucks out there. So any place there's big bucks, there's people running around after them. And New York City was a fascinating place to work. We deal with a lot of endangered species trafficking in New York City. The endangered species as pets. We took a tiger out of somebody's apartment in Manhattan at one point. I mean, you get to see what the inside of a whale
Really?
looks like when you're a downstate environmental
Yeah,
conservation
sure.
officer in New York State. So the work was awesome. I do miss the work to some extent, but I'm an upstate kid, so it's great to be back upstate checking hunters and fishermen and kind of the classic game warden job that you think of when you think of a game warden.
Now, kind of western upstate New York, it's pretty rural, right?
Very rural. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's a different feel from what a lot of the country would think if they hadn't been to New York. What they'd think of, people associate New York City with New York. Right?
That's very true.
Just like here, people just assume every place is Yellowstone and the Tetons.
Pretty much.
And everything has that, but New York's very different.
Yeah, we have, Western New York's got the Great Lakes right there in Niagara Falls, which most people are probably familiar with, but we have the Finger Lakes, which are absolutely beautiful rolling hills with wine country. You've got the Catskill Mountains, the Adirondack Mountains, the Hudson River Valley. So, and Long Island, of course, is beautiful too. So there's actually a lot to New York State that people don't think about.
So do you know how many, and I don't know, tell me your title again.
I'm a lieutenant.
So,
Yep.
But within, what's some states have fish and game and fish.
Our title is Environmental Conservation Officer,
okay.
and New York's fairly unusual among similar game warden type jobs in that we enforce all environmental laws. So we do hunting and fishing. We do pollution laws as well.
Oh, really?
Endangered species trafficking is another aspect to that, but hazardous waste dumping, air quality, solid waste, that type of thing. So it's a very diverse
that's
job.
a really diverse
Yeah.
job. Wow.
That's different than Wyoming. We have a whole Department of Environmental Quality, and then we have a Wyoming Game and Fish Department. So
Yeah. So one of my officers could be working on an illegal burn one day, and the next day he could be working a big game poaching case.
So how much of your time is dedicated to the wildlife enforcement side versus some of the other?
I'd be tough to pin it down, but I'd say at least 50%, if not more, is hunting and fishing still.
Okay.
But there's certainly a big component to enforcing smoky truck laws and things like that, and the environmental quality is a big part of what we do, as you can imagine. There's people out there trying to put nasty stuff in the water or the soil because it's cheaper than disposing of it properly.
So what degree do you have?
I happen to have a master's degree. You need at least a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree with some experience to get on our job.
In what?
Natural resource management.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I was curious because you're describing things that it could be an engineer, it could be a wildlife biologist. I assume you have your staff, that you work with.
Yeah, we're
or a
very lucky
variety.
that the Department of Environmental Conservation employs hundreds and hundreds of civilian employees that are not part of the Division of Law Enforcement, and they are engineers, they're wildlife biologists, they specialize. So we have staff to sort of back us up with their expertise on a lot of these different things.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. So how many enforcement officers do you have? Do you have
It's
an
probably
idea?
right around 300. That's if you count, us useless supervisors.
And how long have you been doing it?
11 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's sometimes a pretty thankless job, right?
Can be, but boy, I'm actually third generation game warden. My grandfather and my father were game wardens, so I grew up with a huge appreciation for what we do. And I tell you, you visit some other countries and you really realize that we do a pretty important job when you see how wisely our natural resources really are managed and how well we're doing with conserving a lot of resources.
So out here in the West, and you and I were talking about this a little bit before the podcast, out here in the West, like for example in Wyoming, 50% of our land is public land. Some states like Nevada, it's approaching 90%.
That's amazing.
Yeah, right. It's not like that in New York. I mean, you have some public land,
No,
obviously,
and
but
I don't know what the statistic is. It's certainly less public land than that, but there's still a pretty good amount. Like I grew up on my parents' farm where I hunted, but as I moved across the state for work, I never was any place where I couldn't find some public land to go grouse hunting or duck hunting or turkey hunting or whatever on. So there's a pretty good public land.
So as an enforcement officer, how do you work with the public and private landowners to enforce wildlife laws when you have when access can be a little bit more difficult? And I'm presuming access for law enforcement is like it is most places. You have to have reasonable suspicion that something's going on. And,
Exactly.
And does the open fields doctrine apply in New York?
Open fields does apply. Yep. And to answer your first question, the biggest part, of course, is encouraging the hunting and sporting public to be respectful of landowners and to, respect posted property, get permission in advance. It's getting harder, certainly. There's money in leasing your land out for hunting purposes, so it's maybe a little harder to find someone who's willing to say, yeah, sure, just go ahead and hunt on my back 40. But still, if you show up looking like a decent person in advance of the hunting season and respectfully request permission, it's still pretty easy to get access to most people's private property. So we certainly, when we do outreaches, which we do a lot of, our state association does a ton of youth and women's and other different groups outreach and encouraging people to get out and hunt. We always really stress that proper manners and courtesy goes a long way towards getting private permission.
So wildlife management is a collaborative process.
Definitely.
Yeah. And it is a lot of places, but I think in places where you have those, where you have less public land and you're forced to engage with the landowners.
We need our private
right?
landowners for sure. And we need them to be able to manage the populations.
Right.
We do issue some nuisance permits that my department does for forestry and agricultural purposes, but boy, you're way better off if you can, have them taken during the hunting season when everything gets used, and it's, much better for the resource.
Now, switching gears just really quickly, one of the most effective laws on the book, there's an interstate compact.
Yes.
This wildlife violators compact that's been, I want to say we're up to almost 48 states, 46 states. I can't remember.
It's very high now.
But it's getting close to 50, and New York's a member of that compact. Right?
Yeah.
And my understanding of that compact, it's if you are convicted of a violation in one state, then the other state, every other state that's part of that compact will recognize that conviction.
Exactly.
And so you could lose your hunting privileges if you break the law in New York. You could lose your hunting privileges in 48 other states or 47 other states, something like that.
And I tell you, some of the laws on the books, I'm sure this is true in a lot of states, not just New York, are a bit antiquated, and they don't really compute to the dollar value of enough to inhibit someone from going and doing it again. And some people, I know it's just the cost of doing business. They'll pay their fine and they'll go do it again. But boy, you tell somebody you're taking away their hunting license, and it's a whole different story. So, and you tell them you're taking it away in 48 other states, and it's definitely a serious incentive to not do it again.
Do you see, for the most part, are most hunters respectful of the laws?
Absolutely, yeah. And that's one of the best things about our job is 99% of the people we deal with are the best people in the world you could ask for. Families out enjoying our natural resources. So that's great. That's who you get to interact with for the most part.
And you have to be glad, because also you have to be the only law enforcement officers out there that when you go into the field, everybody you encounter is armed.
Yes,
right?
That's true. Yep. And you can't get all jumpy about it either.
Right.
So.
You just know you're going in knowing, everybody I talk to, everybody's armed. But for the most part,
and
they're
we're
just
very
all
lucky
really
that
great people.
The vast majority of the sporting public is safe and responsible and good people.
So before you step out, I have to ask, and you don't have to share if you don't want, but I'm kind of curious. I've heard a lot of great stories. Shawn has told me some of his stories in the past. Do you have any fascinating stories? You touched on one. I mean, you said you came across a tiger in an apartment in New York City. That's a unique. I don't know how you top that, but I imagine you've got to have some pretty interesting and unique stories.
I know you're going to have some other game wardens in here to talk about some of their stuff, so I'll do a New York City story, which is probably a little bit different from some of the other stuff you might hear. But I'd been a lieutenant for about a week, and I was being an upstate non-city kid. I was trying not to walk around looking up at the skyscrapers. I was trying to be cool and look professional. And we ended up having a search warrant. We found some alligator meat that didn't have proper documentation. So we wound up doing a search warrant in this basement in Chinatown in downtown Manhattan. And there was a gentleman there who only had one arm, interestingly enough, just to make the story even weirder.
He was a gator hunter. I'm assuming he lost one battle.
Yeah, he was a proprietor of gator meat, and we were trying to figure out how to handcuff him because they don't teach you that in the academy. But we got around that obstacle.
To the leg?
Yeah, we found a chair and secured him for the time being.
Okay.
But the whole shop there was hundreds of pounds of alligator hands. Like if you chop the alligator foot off, kind of at the wrist, hundreds of boxes of that. So that was weird, all dried out. And then there was this string strung across with these little dried up finger-like things on it, and it turned out it was a variety of animal penises that they had dried. Because certain cultures value the powdered tiger penis as like an aphrodisiac.
Yeah, I've heard of that. What was the movie? It had like three penis wine.
What are you watching?
Dave watches movies that I don't watch.
No, me either. None that I would admit to anyway.
Wouldn't that be 3 peni? Wine?
It's got to be. I
So
can't
go
remember
ahead
the name.
with
But
the
anyway,
story.
continue with the story.
Before this goes downhill. So what they were doing was they were basically defrauding the customer, claiming it was tiger penis, and we had it DNA tested, and it was a variety of other animals like bobcat and deer and raccoon, I think. So, but it really blew my mind. I didn't know stuff like that existed until I got to New York City.
Welcome to New York. I want to see any more singing.
No, we don't need Sinatra. No. At least not from you.
And I debate whether that's called singing.
Wow. No human, though.
Not that I know of. No.
Wow.
No,
that was the first week on the job.
Yeah, first week as a lieutenant. As a supervisor, where I was supposed to act like everything was, I knew it was a deal.
So
I've seen this before.
And do you have your own... I mean, you said you went back and ran forensics on DNA on these. Do you have your own lab, or do you have to send that out?
We don't. We send them out to, depending on the situation, we utilize the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services lab, or, and again, that's why it's so important to have things like NOEA, where you come and get together and you share ideas and resources, because I know a guy that can figure out how to do that for me.
We were debating on how to pronounce the acronym.
Yeah, say that again.
NOEA. Yes.
North American Wildlife Enforcement Officers Association. NOEA.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, we were guessing how you pronounce that.
So before you go, I have a real question. Fairly serious. So you're in one of the, I would think, from Wyoming's perspective, you're in one of the states that is about as different in general, just as you can get. So what is it like being a wildlife officer, working with more of a conservative community, and being in really one of the states that, some might say is one of the more liberal states in the U.S., and what kind of challenges does that bring to the job?
Well, it's certainly less liberal above Long Island and New York City. So you meet, it's probably less different than you imagine once you get in the upstate area where most of our hunting and fishing goes on. But it's certainly a state where education is supremely important, because we have a voting population that's largely a downstate population that just doesn't understand hunting and fishing. They're not necessarily opposed to it, but they don't understand the value that it can have in society today, or in natural resource management for that matter. So, again, having conservation officers associations where we go out of our way to really promote wise use of our resources and why hunting can be a good thing and a safe thing and a great thing for families and a great way to be healthy. That's probably more of an issue where you have a big part of the public that just doesn't understand it.
How do you combat that in the largest city in the country, where a vast majority of folks, I'm imagining, and I might be wrong, but I figure a lot of them don't get out of the city.
Not only don't get out of the city, but there's a large segment of that weren't raised in America.
Yes.
And don't understand the North American model, or just at all. It's just a different ethos that are bringing into the United States.
Yeah, and there certainly is, when you work in New York City, and I had a bunch of officers, the fishing is actually a big deal in New York City. There's a ton of recreational and commercial fishing. So it's just, it's education, professionalism, and reaching as many people as you can.
But with 300 statewide, is that what you said you had?
Yeah. We could definitely use 300 just in New York City.
To reach the, 12 million in the metro area?
Yeah, it swells to just about that, I think.
It's
amazing.
I'm presuming that you're working also with, Port Authority and other law enforcement to try to,
yes,
spread the enforcement net.
Definitely. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we've done some great cases with them in the city.
Yeah.
The import and export through JFK is a big deal.
Especially if you're working on endangered species, import-export, you're probably
shark
working
fins,
with
elephant
fish.
ivory, our investigators have done some phenomenal cases, multi-million-dollar seizures through search warrants of elephant ivory coming in from Africa. So New York State really has a big nexus to other countries.
New York City is one of the largest ports for importing wildlife parts from around the globe.
Yeah.
There are a handful of them around the country, but New York's really one of the largest.
So when they come in, you said
busy.
From around the globe, do they come in and they go elsewhere? So this is not American consumption primarily, or no?
No, there's a big slice of it that's American consumption. Certainly a significant portion of it goes onward to other major traffickers of endangered species, but particularly in New York City, there's a big demand for illegal wildlife parts.
It's a little bit different world than what we're used to.
I mean,
this is fascinating.
Yeah, you'd never think. You really wouldn't think that, most of the people who live in what we might call flyover country, that, the perception that you'd have an illegal wildlife trade being driven by consumption in this country is it's foreign to us.
Yeah. It's certainly true in New York City. So.
And I imagine if you're like other agencies around the country, and I'll just kind of leave it with this, because I know you want to get back out to the party.
Of course.
But I've been involved in a lot of different wildlife cases over the years, and visited with a lot of prosecuting attorneys. And I just want to pass along this compliment, because I've heard it a number of times, that the best cases prosecutors ever receive are from their local wildlife enforcement officers. They wrap a bow around the investigations that they do, and the work that they do, and the product that they provide to the prosecutors. They analogize it to, it's better than any Capital One murder case we ever receive. The amount of evidence and work that goes into it, and it just shows. From the recruiting and retention portion of the job, to the everyday interaction with the landowners, to when you're in the unfortunate situation of having to actually enforce.
Yep.
It's that whole suite of work. There's nobody better, in my opinion, at doing this type of law enforcement work than the wildlife officers around the country. And so,
thank you. I think that's certainly true. I think it's hard to find somebody that cares more about their job. And I said the 99% of the population is great people, and we love interacting with them. It's really fun to chase down that other 1% that's doing something they shouldn't be, and we care about it. So
and we're glad you do it. And so I want to thank you, Nephi. You're looking at me funny.
I just want to make sure you're safe, Dave. There's a lot of wardens around here. I'm just worried about your safety.
Why would you be worried about my safety?
Should we be looking at him?
Probably.
Interesting. Okay. We'll talk later.
Well.
Now, wait a minute. I hunt with him.
I'm just kidding. He knows
Don't drag me into this.
Anyway, I want to thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it. One thing we always ask everybody before they leave us, we ask this. So this podcast is called Your Mountain. We're talking about issues that affect your land and water and wildlife, but we also want to know about the places that are important to you. And so we want to know, what's your mountain? What's that place that's most means most to you, most important?
I grew up on a farm in western New York, my parents' farm in Cattaraugus County. So that's where it all comes back to. It's where you kill your first frog and, first squirrel and so on and so forth up until you get to big game.
Well, but apparently you still kill a few frogs.
Yeah, rumor must have gotten out.
Well, thank you again, and we'll let you get back to the party.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we had somebody else just walk in and join us. Kerry, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Kerry Risco. I'm a conservation officer, and I'm an inspector with the Conservation Officer Service in the province of Saskatchewan, based out of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan.
And where is Saskatoon in
Saskatoon? Well, Saskatoon's the biggest city in the province, more or less in the center of the province. From Cheyenne, we're about 13 and a half hours due north.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so I think I have some friends that go fish for northern pike and walleye.
Saskatchewan is known for its fish and wildlife resources, but fisheries for sure. We have a lot of Americans fly or come to northern Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan is quite a divide. The southern half of this province is mostly agriculture, rural area, and then the northern half of the province is complete forest, rock, lakes, wilderness. It's like a marked divide, and so the northern Saskatchewan absolutely has lots of wilderness opportunities, fishing especially.
So what are your the main suite of wildlife that you have in Saskatchewan?
The main suite? Well, we have most of the big game species in Saskatchewan. We have pronghorn antelope, white-tailed deer, mule deer, elk, moose, black bear. That's the species we hunt. We also have woodland and barren ground caribou. We don't hunt the woodland. The barren ground, limited hunting. You have to live in the extreme northern part of the province to be able to hunt northern or barren ground caribou. We have cougar, but you're only allowed to trap those. So that's the big game species.
What subspecies of moose do you have? Is it Shiras still? Don't know.
Well, we just the northern moose.
Just moose, yeah.
It's just
we don't
big
have the
moose,
Alaska
right?
moose. We don't have the Alaska moose.
Right,
but
right,
we
yeah,
have the moose.
Right.
1,200 pound moose.
Yeah. I think you got Shiras moose there.
Elsie's? No.
Yeah. But they break them up into 4 different.
Oh, I did not. I just knew the difference between Alaska moose and the rest. I didn't know there was 4.
Well, so groups have to have grand slams. So maybe there's not a legitimate 4. Maybe they've broken up by 4.
Maybe it's like your
Utah
your cutthroat, your Utah trout slam.
Right.
Cutthroat.
Yeah. I'm still bitter about that.
So Saskatchewan. So I'm an American. I want to come up to Saskatchewan. Really gorgeous area, great resources. What's it like for an American if somebody down here in the States said, I want to go hunt in Saskatchewan? What would you say?
Well, to begin with, it is a little bit limited. So to hunt big game in Saskatchewan, right now there's only currently 3 species you can hunt, and that would be black bear, white-tailed deer, or moose. Mm-hmm. Each of those any big game species, an American has to be guided by a Saskatchewan guide. White-tailed deer is our big attraction for sure. The Saskatchewan holds the world record for the largest typical white-tailed deer ever shot.
Do you know how big that was? Like
213 and 5/8.
Wow.
Typical.
Give or take.
Size of white-tailed deer.
Well, I was asked that question today, as a matter of fact. Yeah. It's 213 and something. I say 5/8, but so that was shot at in 1993, and so it's brought a lot of pressure to Saskatchewan. Like a lot of people want to hunt our white-tailed deer. We have more Boone and Crockett white-tailed deer shot on a per capita basis than anywhere else in North America. Like, we don't kill more white-tailed deer than Alabama or Mississippi, perhaps, but on a number of bases, your chances of shooting a Boone and Crockett are better in Saskatchewan than anywhere else in North America.
Do you know why that is?
Well, that's funny you should say that. We have a preponderance of potash. Like, we have a lot of potash in our soil or mines. We have I don't know how many potash mines. Potash is a fertilizer that's used for agriculture fertilizers. So there's been some loosely attributed things to say, well, maybe it's the potash. I don't know. Nobody's ever.
You just know you grow them big.
They grow them pretty good.
So
well, they have.
Yeah.
So anyway, I should finish your question. So moose opportunities are minimal. The open areas for Americans are remote and not wonderful by any means. Black bear, we have lots and lots and lots, but Americans can go many, many places for black bear. So that's not the big attraction. I would say the big attraction for sure would be our white-tailed deer.
So an interesting note, you talked about soil nutrients potentially being a big part of your, antler growth.
Oh, Nephi's going to nerd out
yeah,
here.
So in my former life, I was a soil scientist for a number of years for USDA. And there are certain areas here in the state of Wyoming where you get bigger bucks, and it's based on soil type. And you can actually map the soil types. The soil types then correlate, of course, to your vegetation types. Mm-hmm. And so we have certain plants that have a higher uptake of calcium. Mm-hmm. And so they're taking that out of the soil in these certain soil types from a certain geology type. They're uptaking into their leaves. It's preferentially browsed by mule deer, and you get bigger deer.
So
fact.
So I guess what he's saying is he's validating your theory.
Yeah.
Well, it's not my theory. It's what I've heard. But anyway.
All I heard was dirt is brown.
It's not
That's all I
dirt.
know.
It's soil.
No, actually,
dirt is misplaced soil.
Actually, I'd like to talk about this more at some other time because I think this is really interesting. You find I think we can have a separate.
I'm not showing you the map, Dave.
That's not what I was getting at. I was actually trying to compliment you for once. That you gave some good information there, and I'd like to talk about that more
Dave,
at some point.
I want you to know that I appreciate compliments from you very much.
Because they don't come very often, right? They mean
that's
more.
That's how I know that we're friends. You're willing to. I don't know where to go with this.
No, stop. I'm going to take away the compliment. So, Kerry, what are some of the biggest wildlife enforcement and management challenges you have?
That's tough. I would say it ebbs and flows with our populations. So a few years ago, in my former posting, when wildlife populations were high, we had a high number of deer shot and left, or big game animals shot and left. And then that, as the population, we had some bad winters. 2010 to 2014, we had 3 out of 4 bad winters, and the big game populations really suffered. And so did the number of animals shot and left. But the last 2 years, we had an increase again in animals shot and left. So I would say that's a big challenge. Now, the question always is, why are these animals shot and left? Grant you, there's a certain number that are shot and lost.
Failure to recover.
Well, they lose them.
Yep.
Genuinely shoot, and the animal gets away. But there's a far greater number of animals high-graded, where people shoot and say, ground shrinkage, that sort of thing, and they want a bigger one. And so then just leave it.
So it's not even like situations we see here a lot. It's, you have somebody that poaches a deer and they'll cut the antlers or the head off and they'll leave the rest of the carcass. It's pretty rare that you actually, if it's an antlered animal, that you actually see the antlers still attached to the body.
Oh,
you see that a lot, huh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we do. The number of animals that are shot, the antlers cut off and the animal left, not a lot, I would say, not a lot. It's animals that are shot and wide open field, broad daylight, and there's a buck or a moose or whatever the case may be, and it's shot and left. And
do you have any success in finding the culprits?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've had some cases, good cases, and we publicize the heck out of them for people to know that you're not going to get away. You'd be surprised how many people, they'll drive up to the animal. Of course, they want to see it, and they look and they say, it's not very big or not as big as I thought. And when they get out of the truck, they kick out a receipt, or something like that, from the gas station. That'll do, right? We'll get them down.
I heard a story once here of a warden that found a can of chew, an empty can of chew, and was able to track that back to a convenience store that sold it, and then they found they had the cameras at the convenience store and saw the license plate, and they were able to get the guy and then run the DNA on the animal that he had and compare it to the animal left in the field, the head that he had, and compare it to the animal left in the field.
Well, the DNA, if he took the antlers, that's a done deal.
But that one can of chewing tobacco enabled them to actually locate the vehicle and track him down to be able to take that sample.
I didn't know that chew has any kind of serial number, but I know like beer cans do, for example. They got an individual number on them, so if there was a beer can left behind, they can tell us where that beer can was distributed to, and then, like you say, whether it's a camera or whatever. So the other thing is witnesses. Like a lot of time, we had a case recently, I guess it was 2 years ago now. One of my officers had a cow moose that was actually shot in the spring, like in April, and they only took a portion of the meat, left behind the rest of the animal and her fetus, like the fetus of the cow that was pregnant with a baby moose. And upon investigation, they saw there was tire tracks in this particular field, and it was obvious the guy got stuck. The perpetrator got stuck. So they just did some old homework, and they started asking around. And somebody said, there was 2 guys walking down the road, and I gave them a ride over here so that they could get a, call for a ride or tow truck. It wasn't a tow truck, it was another friend's. Anyway, that just led us along the way. And so eyewitnesses say there was somebody here, and, a mile away walking down the road. They were probably the ones who were stuck, type of thing,
So is that usually what it takes? It's to break one of these cases open, is it takes another citizen seeing something?
Well, like I mentioned, it could be a receipt falling on the ground.
Right.
It witnesses, like Saskatchewan's pretty rural, where the hunting occurs. It's like people don't live every mile. So
what's the population of Saskatchewan?
Well, the province as a whole, it's 1.1 million people, but
they're all pretty densely populated.
Somebody's going to have to do the math to how many square miles Saskatchewan is. Like it's a very big province. I could probably guess it's 3 times the size of Wyoming. I'd probably guess.
So
3 or 5 times.
It's impressive.
So if it's about 3 times the size of Wyoming and has about 3 times the people, I think we can extrapolate some of it's pretty rural.
Yeah. I mean, we have big cities too, but where the hunting occurs.
Yeah. So how long have you been in the enforcement game?
I just celebrated my 40th year.
40 years.
In June 5th. Yeah.
Mike, you just celebrated 40 years recently too, but
like a year ago.
I know, but that's different. That's of life.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Obviously, thank you for your service to your community, to your wildlife, to your province, to your country.
So
that's fantastic.
If I can ask kind of a parting shot question, so it's super cool that you came down here. Thank you for making the time. Thank you for sharing it with us. What's the biggest difference between, when you look at, do you see a difference when you look across the border at our game wardens and the laws and the way it's set up? Is there something that you kind of wish that you had that we do, or something that you guys do in Canada that you say, you should look at this? What's your takeaway? This is what's different between me and my cousins.
Well, I will say game wardens are game wardens. The ilk is the same. This conference that I'm attending, we can sit and talk. I can talk with somebody I had a genuine 3-hour conversation today with somebody from Alabama. It was his first time at this convention. Work is similar. What was different was the in the United States, the game wardens worked a lot closer with other police agencies. Okay, if you guys know about the Arkansas game warden, that there was 2 state troopers that had been shot by freemen of the land, if you know about that. No,
but tell us. Now you've started down this road.
Well, this is 4 or 5 years ago. There was these freemen of the land who are a sovereign nation, who believe they're sovereign citizens, don't owe the government of the United States or Canada anything. And they shot dead 2 state troopers. And so when the call went out, all hands on deck, if you will, it was a game warden who responded to a Walmart parking lot in West Memphis, Arkansas, and ended up in a shootout with these two sovereign citizens. You can research this yourself, and killed them dead. And so that would be an example up until until recently, where Canada was different. The Canadian conservation officers / game wardens wouldn't be engaged in that sort of law enforcement as far as supporting other police agencies. But that's changing, and certainly in Saskatchewan, it has changed just in the last few months, that we are now more like our American counterparts. So that we are responding to police calls, domestic violence, break and enters. If we can be assisting, responding, first on scene, we're there, type of thing. So that's that's new, but that was the difference. But your question to begin with, as far as what differences we see between us, not a lot. Like I say, some do different jobs. Like some agencies have parks, like even in their names, they're parks, and others aren't. And Saskatchewan, we're environment, and other agencies, like even my neighbors in Canada, they don't have anything to do with environment protection.
Well, thank you for the work that you do. I know here it's the law enforcement represent the best in service and it doesn't matter whether it's wildlife law enforcement or whether it's the people rolling up and down our streets in their cruisers here. I mean, really the level of selflessness and going out there and doing that job for somebody other than yourself, it's appreciated by everybody here.
So I want to ask one more question too. I'm curious, what does it take? What is the process in Saskatchewan for becoming a game warden, for becoming a wildlife enforcement officer?
Not easy.
Yeah.
You got to be dedicated. You want to know the whole process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Starts off, a person would enroll in a college program on their own volition, so they're not being paid. It's on their own. They enroll in a program, and it's, depending where they go into school, 2 to 4 years. That's where they get their basis for resource management. So fish and wildlife, managing the fish and wildlife, and learning about fish and wildlife and law enforcement. And then they're going to, in Saskatchewan, they're going to want to get their foot in the door with us. And we hire summertime, we call them seasonal conservation officers. 4 months of the year, they work with us. But to get in with us, they're going to have to pass first they need a valid driver's license. They need to not have any kind of criminal record. They pass an interview, then they pass a police psychological exam, and they have to pass a physical fitness test. All of that to get 4 months' work. And they'll do that for 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 summers. And then we have openings in our training academy. And so then we'll advertise. So we hire 50 of these seasonal officers for 4 months a year. So from that pool of 50, we might have an opening for 5 people for permanent jobs. So they go through all the same things. They have to do all again, another psychological exam, physical fitness test, criminal record check. One added element now, because they've been working for us, we have reference checks. So we can call their bosses and get a detailed analysis how they are. Is this guy got the mustard to move forward? And if they do that, then we send them away for 16 weeks of training. So it's like our depot, or our police depot. And it's a joint academy with Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Alberta, British Columbia, and the Yukon. Western Canada, they set up a training academy for 16 weeks. During those 16 weeks, they get all of their enforcement training. So they get the pistol, sidearm, shotgun. Oh, because I should add, when they're working for 4 months of the year, they don't get their pistol or shotgun, anything like that. So, but they get all their firearms training, tranquilizer to handle, the chemical immobilization of animals, interview and interrogation, snowmobile, all-terrain vehicle, boat operation. What else am I missing? Swift water rescue, ice water rescue. There's just 16 weeks of intense
fun.
And
what I heard.
Yeah, and then they pass all that, and then they come back to Saskatchewan and begin work.
So this is amazing. And for perspective, Shawn's joined us again. I want him to talk about the same process to become a game warden in at least in Wyoming. Other states are different, but in Wyoming. But before I do that, I just needed to note, everything that Kerry's talked about here, everything you've mentioned about the process to become a warden in Saskatchewan. If you want to become a congressman in the United States, you need to be 25 years old and a legal U.S. citizen, and then you can make the laws for the country. But in order to enforce those laws, you have to go through hell and back to be able to do it. And we want to make sure we have the best of the best. And I just want to make sure that everybody that's listening understands, this isn't an easy job. It's not an easy job to get. And no matter where you are, and there's a process. And Shawn, you've come back into the room, and I appreciate it. Can you describe the process in Wyoming? And I know it's changed probably since you started years ago. But I'll fill in blanks if I have to. But I think the process.
The process basically starts off. Of course, you apply. You'll get interviews and such. There's a test you actually take to apply. You have to do well enough on that test to even get to an interview. Then you'll do your interview. You'll do a psychological panel, a lie detector, stuff like that to get through. Once you get hired on, here in Wyoming, we'll send you to the Law Enforcement Academy, which goes with every law enforcement officer in the state goes to the Law Enforcement Academy. It is not at all warden specific. There's usually like half a day on warden stuff. Otherwise, it's just law enforcement. It's 13 or maybe it's 14 weeks now. It's not quite as in-depth as theirs. Then when you get out, there's a lot of just sort of off-the-cuff training. Different supervisors will have different training regimes for their guys. So you don't really have an FTO officer with you, but you'll have certain things you have to do and go work with wardens.
Sorry to interrupt, when you say FTO?
Field training officer.
Okay.
So most law enforcement, they'll ride with a field training officer. So you'll have a guy next to you in the seat that can answer questions, and he sort of watches you and makes sure you're doing the right things. Here we don't really have that. We have a guy in each region that's responsible for that, but he's not going to be with you every day. So you'll have like a set, like you'll go through, say you'll do interrogation and statutes with one guy, another guy you'll work on damage with, another guy you'll do watercraft with, but you'll just have like a day here, a day there with them. So you got to absorb all that information. We're very independent here in Wyoming. You got to pick a guy in every state.
Sounds like in Saskatchewan too.
More so than this, but we would love to have that FTO as well, the field training officer. Sadly, most of our new recruits are plunked because we're short-staffed. They're plunked into situations where they work alone and they're expected to begin work. But most often it's in very remote. I mentioned about northern Saskatchewan. It's very that it's all forest and lakes. It's very isolated, and that's where they start their careers. It's not where anybody wants to finish their career. It's not a healthy place to be, especially no place to raise a family.
It's sort of interesting. It feels like in Wyoming, a lot of folks want to get to the most remote places possible in the state. They're a different kind of remote.
Yeah, our most remote would probably be comfortable for these guys.
Different kind of remote.
You can't imagine.
I want to imagine. I want to
experience.
I want to experience.
It's Dave's career goal.
You can come up and experience it for a week or weekend, and you'll say that's enough.
Yeah,
I promise you.
Yeah,
and all the wardens throughout the country always have different challenges. I mean, that's why it's nice being here, is we can talk to each other and see what's cool in their country, or what's the hardest part about their job, or the easiest part, or what weird things they have as a local, like, wildlife take thing. We were talking to someone earlier who was shooting frogs with a .22. That's not something we do here in Wyoming. I guarantee that's not something you do in Saskatchewan. But, different things in different areas, so it's cool to visit with everyone and see, even though someone's doing frogs versus elk, there's a lot of similarities in enforcing those things and who the violators are. So, we all get to get along and figure out these things, and it's really cool to see and just hear the stories.
I do want to add on to what you said, Shawn, about the process here, because I want to make it clear to everybody. When you describe this long process, if there's one job opening for a game warden in Wyoming, the process will start with 70 or 80 people taking the game warden exam.
Yes.
And by the time you get through the various levels of the exam, the psychological evaluation, the polygraph test, the law enforcement academy, by the time you get through all of that, well, law enforcement academy comes after, but by the time you get through all those steps, there might be 3 or 4 people worth interviewing, let alone offering a job to, from that initial pool of 80 people once you go through those various steps. So just to emphasize that it's highly competitive and seeking the best of the best to be able to do this job and carry out the trust obligations that the state has to manage wildlife.
And it's real important to do all that kind of testing that they do because, all of us, we're just out there on our own. We have to have the motivation to do what we're supposed to do when we're supposed to do it without being tracked or followed or having someone telling you to do it. I mean, most of us didn't see our bosses very often. We're just out in the field doing what we know is right and what we're supposed to do, and we have to know, we're the face of the agency a lot of the time. We're out there talking to people. They have questions about something, fishing, hunting, stocking rates, anything like that. We have to be able to find the answers and get the answers right away. So it does take, the right individual for it, but I encourage anyone who's interested to definitely go for it because it's a great career.
I think that's a great point. For those of you who are listening to this and thinking that you're too depressed to try now, they weren't talking to you. You guys, if you think that you want to do it, go for it because you really need that big pool too, so you can get the best. And if there's a question you think if you're in your head, you're like, I love this, I want to do this, I think I can do this. Convince yourself that be the best that you can be. Go for it because I think I really value hanging out with law enforcement guys and our game wardens. They're great guys, and it just shows you it's just a unique class of individuals. And if you get to become one of them and be part of that family, that's a special thing. That's cool.
So I have 2 questions for each of you. The first one is, could you share briefly, because we don't have a lot of time left. We don't want to keep you from your friends out here. Your most unique experience or story that you're willing to share of your career in law enforcement.
Just so you know, the last one here is going to be pretty tough to. It had to do with alligator hands.
Liza's was pretty good.
Well,
and stuff.
Yeah.
We don't want to spoil the surprise.
Yeah. Right.
You want me to go first?
Sure.
I'll throw
you probably got a better thing than me. But anyway.
I don't know. Mine was just a funny one that I thought of. So I was out checking on the river. We were checking duck and goose hunters, and I was with another game warden. And we pull up to these guys, and they just sort of, had that look to their face that they had done something that they shouldn't have, and we couldn't quite figure out what it was. I'm over in their blind checking stuff, and the other guy's on shore, and it was sort of my contact. The other guy's on shore, and he's like, "Hey, Shawn, come here." And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Look what their bird dog just brought me." And his bird dog went in the brush, picked up a muskrat they had shot without a license or anything, and brought it to the other game warden. And it was a brand new bird dog. So it was a pretty funny case report to have to put in your case report that the assisting officer was a black lab that was owned by the suspects. So, it was a good one.
That's pretty good.
Well, I thought where you were going to go is the place I was going to go, and that's something that after a period of time, and for everybody it's different, but it's when you develop the sixth sense, and it's when the back of your hair starts standing up on the back because there's something here, and you're not sure what it is. And I can think of a few cases like that, both migratory waterfowl checks and big game where you check the hunters and everything on the surface just seems perfect, tickety-boo, and there's nothing. And then as they leave, you decide to do a little bit more digging, and you encounter or uncover, like in one case, there was 3 elderly gentlemen, like 60, 70, and 75 years old, and they had a mule deer doe, and they were skinning it on the ground on the back of their truck, and everything was just perfect, just so perfect, and they were friendly, and I just didn't like them, and so I drove away, and I just went and parked a ways away, and I watched them. And as they drove away, I went back to the scene, and I said, something's here, and I followed the drag marks where they had dragged this mule deer doe up to their truck. And sure enough, I just looked from where I found the blood where they had shot the doe. And I looking like 20 yards away, here's this, which you couldn't see from where they were standing, here's a dead fawn. So they shot both the doe and the fawn, chose to leave the fawn, which I talk about. And but it's that sixth sense of uncanny ability to sense there's something more here. And I've had that happen many times. And that is a real sense of accomplishment when you know there's something and then you can find it.
And so that's also a message to everybody out there listening that
they will find you.
They will find you.
They will find you.
Just follow the law. And most people do. I mean, that's the one thing that I want to be crystal clear about here. Most people are great. Most hunters are great. It's the few that give everybody else the bad name. The second question I wanted to ask each of you. So we asked Liza this earlier. This is the Your Mountain podcast. We're talking about issues that are related to your land, water, and wildlife, but it's also about what's important to you individually. And so I'd ask each one of you, what's your mountain? What's that place that is most important to you?
Oh, to me personally, like what's most important, or what's issue of the day? If you
no, what's to you personally? What's that place? What's your mountain? What's your place that gives you the most joy, peace? Whatever.
Well, so 28 years ago, I was transferred to Southwest Saskatchewan. So Saskatchewan's a very diverse province. So it has the northern forests and rocks and lakes. It has the fringe, which is interspersed with cropland and trees and lakes and water. The Southwest is not unlike Wyoming. It's very arid, prairie, wide open landscapes, but it's rolling. And so if you're asking me my place, that's my place. It's Southwest, which is not unlike Wyoming, Southwest Saskatchewan, where people, I met an artist once who just pointed out to me, Kerry, he says, it's not flat, for example. People say, well, it's just all flat. Well, it's not flat. There's always rolling hills. And there's different colors, the artist again. He says the greens and the oranges and the yellows and all the different hues of colors. And when he talked to me about that, and I started appreciating the prairie, and there's a lot of my counterparts in Saskatchewan that are not like me. They want to be in the forest where there's green and there's water. The prairie is not water, but it's beautiful country, and that's my place, I guess. And and the other thing about the southwest part of Saskatchewan is the abundance of wildlife. Like, not so much fish, wildlife, like unbelievable wildlife.
Oh, that's great.
You paint a pretty picture.
Yeah.
So mine's more of my place is sort of everywhere, as long as I'm able to get outside of town and see my kids enjoying whatever they're doing out and about, like whether it's at a busy state park and they go across the fence and see an old dead tree and I think it's like the coolest thing ever. It just makes me happy to see that like they can get out and that's like something that they enjoy. Or taking them antelope hunting with me and them like just pointing at different organs saying, "What's that, Dad? What's that? What's that?" And not being timid about it and just enjoying the outdoors and seeing that there's kids that are still out there that like that stuff, so we can promote that stuff. And then hopefully someday I'll be taking my grandkids out to nature and hunting and fishing and stuff. So my place is basically anywhere outdoors I can get my kids, whether it's public or private land, as long as they're having fun outside, looking at nature, looking at bugs, hunting or fishing. That's just sort of my place.
Oh, you both have sort of described my mountain
Yeah,
to a
right.
T. No, thanks you guys for being here, for taking the time with us. I know there's a lot of people out there that you want to visit with, and so it means a lot that you took a little time to visit with us. Shawn, thanks for everything that you've done to help organize this amazing event and bring folks from all over the country, all over North America, to Cheyenne, Wyoming. It's a great event, and we really just want you to know we appreciate everything you do. So thanks for taking the time with us, and again, for everything you do.
Yep.
And until next time, I think we're going to go out and maybe enjoy some of this crowd as well.
All right.
And we'll just catch up with everybody next time on the Your Mountain podcast.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
All right.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Great night.
Mike here from the Your Mountain podcast. We need a favor. Go on our website, itsyourmountain.com, and find the links to Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram so that you can like and follow us, and also so that you can share us with your friends. Wherever you got this podcast from, go ahead and click subscribe, rate us, and leave a comment. These simple things will really help us get the word out. That's itsyourmountain.com. Thanks for the help.